Okay, so we're going to do the salutation to the Buddha first. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Homage to the Blessed One, the Worthy One, the fully enlightened one. Okay, so we are moving on now with our reading of the Anguttara Nikaya. We are in the Book of Sevens. And now let me share the screen. Okay, is the screen visible?
Yes, Bhante, we can see it.
Okay. And so now we're going to be taking four suttas that form a group. And so this will start with the Book of Sevens, Sutta number 16. And first I'm going to go through the first part of each sutta, taking them all together, and then we'll sort of elaborate the explanation. Okay, so the text says that there are these seven kinds of persons who are worthy of gifts, worthy of hospitality, worthy of offerings, worthy of a salutation, the unsurpassed field of merit for the world. So that's, of course, that is the traditional uh, verse of homage to the Sangha. And so, yeah, so first I'm going to take just the first sentence of each of these suttas. So a person who dwells contemplating impermanence in all sankharas, in all conditioned phenomena, perceiving impermanence, experiencing impermanence constantly, continuously, and uninterruptedly, focusing on it with the mind, fathoming it with, let me increase the size,
Terrific. Thank you.
fathoming it with wisdom. Okay, then we go into the seven types of persons, but I'm going to move on quickly to see to take the other suttas in this group. Okay, so that's number 16. Then we come to 17, which says the same thing um, regarding the person who dwells contemplating dukkha, translated here as suffering, of course, which is not a fully adequate rendering for dukkha, but contemplating the dukkha nature, the unsatisfactory nature in all conditioned phenomena, perceiving dukkha, experiencing dukkha. Not that he's experiencing suffering all the time, but he's sort of penetrating the reality of dukkha constantly, continuously, and uninterruptedly focusing on it with the mind, fathoming it with wisdom. Yeah, when I was translating this, I didn't realize until now the implications of saying that he's experiencing suffering. It's not that he's experiencing pain, misery, dejection, depression, and so on, but rather he's experiencing the reality of the unsatisfactory nature of all conditioned things. Okay, so that is the second sutta in this group. Then the third group says the same thing, but here we have a person who dwells contemplating anatta or non-self in all phenomena, perceiving non-self, experiencing non-self constantly, continuously, uninterruptedly, focusing on it with the mind, fathoming it with wisdom. And notice that there's a change here, whereas the contemplations of impermanence and dukkha are directed towards all sankharas, all conditioned things. The contemplation of non-self is directed to all dhammas, like all phenomena, without any limitations, restrictions, or qualifications. We'll have to come back to that later. Okay, then the fourth sutta in this group says that, and it's a little bit puzzling, that some person dwells contemplating the happiness or sukha in nibbana, perceiving this happiness, experiencing it constantly, continuously, and uninterruptedly focusing on it with the mind, fathoming it with wisdom. So we have here in the first three suttas in this group what are known as the Lakkhana, the three characteristics of things. That is impermanence, dukkha, and anatta, non-self. I brought up, because the Pali words are very rich in their implications, and that richness gets somewhat diluted when we translate into English. Okay, so let us look at the Pali, and I'm going to sort of explain the text word for word. And first we have the expression sabba sankharesu, and the key word here is sankhara. And this is a very, very important word to understand when we are studying the Buddhism, the Buddha Dharma. And so the word sankhara is used in different contexts with somewhat different shades of meaning. And so I could think right offhand of three primary meanings of the word sankhara, each determined by its context. First, we have the fourth of the five aggregates. So we have the sankhara khandha, and I translate this, I think more recently, as the aggregate of volitional activities. And so according to the sutta way of explaining the sankhara khandha, this aggregate is equal to the six types of volition. That is, volition occurring by way of, in regard to visible forms, volition regarding sounds, odors, tastes, touch sensations, and volition regarding the mental objects. And then, so that is the way that Sankhara Khandha is defined in the suttas. But then what happens in the Abhidhamma and texts of a somewhat later period is that we see in the suttas there are many other additional kinds of mental factors mentioned, which are not included in they're not feelings, so they don't belong in the feeling aggregate. They are not sanya, not perceptions or ideas, so they don't belong in the aggregate of perception. They're not just consciousness, so they don't belong in the consciousness aggregate. So where do they belong? So in the Abhidhamma system, they are put into the Sankhara Khandha. So this, in the Abhidhamma way of explanation, will include volition plus all of the miscellaneous mental factors. Like to give example, say we have vitakka and vichara. That is, vitakka is thinking, vichara is mental exploration or examination. Where do they belong? They don't go in feelings or perceptions or consciousness. They're mental factors, so they have to go someplace. And so we put them in the sankhara kanda. Then we have, let's see, the unwholesome mental factors. Just take the basic ones, greed, hatred, and ignorance. They go into the aggregate of sankharas. The beautiful, corresponding beautiful factors, non-greed, non-hatred, non-delusion. Well, we could say generosity, loving kindness, and wisdom. Where do they go? Into the sankhara kanda. So the sankhara kanda becomes like an umbrella category. So everything that doesn't, all the mental factors that don't fit into feeling, perception, and consciousness go into the sankhara kanda. Okay, so this is one meaning of sankharas. And here, the basic sense of sankhara is an active one. So the sutta, I think it's Samyutta Nikaya, chapter 22, maybe it's sutta number 79. Check it out. Defines the sankharas as things that condition the conditioned, or things that produce, that construct what is constructed, or that fabricate what is fabricated. So this gives the sankhara an active sense. Okay, then a second use of the word sankhara, a second context in which it occurs, is in relation to paticca samuppada, or dependent origination, where we have avidya, pachaya sankhara, and then sankhara pachaya vijnanam. So ignorance conditions sankharas, and sankharas condition consciousness. And so what is sankhara in this context? Here it's said to equal wholesome, well, let's say unwholesome, and mundane, wholesome volitions. So here it has a narrower sense than the sankhara in the sankhara kanda. So this can be any kind of unwholesome volition, volition which is motivated by greed, delusion, or any of the other defilements. And then the mundane wholesome volition, or in other words, this will be, we could also call it karmic formations or karmic activities. So these are the sankharas here, the volitions considered from the standpoint of their ability to create karma, and that karma becomes a force or a factor that maintains the cycle of repeated birth and death. And so these sankharas condition the arising of consciousness in a new existence, and then those sankharas as karma continue to produce their results in the course of existence. So here I also translate sankhara as volitional activities, but volitional activities here have a somewhat narrower sense than in the sankhara kanda. And then the third major usage of the word, and here sankhara as the second factor of dependent origination, also has the active sense. It's factors or powers or forces that create things. In this case, that create or bring about the arising of new consciousness, and as karma that produce the fruits, the results of karma. Okay, then the third context in which we meet the word sankhara is when we have, for example, in the Dhammapada, there's a series of verses, sabbe sankhara anicca, sabbe sankhara dukkha. And so here, sankhara has the broadest sense of referring to all conditioned things. So everything, and here sankhara has the passive sense of things that are produced by conditions, things that are constructed by conditions. And in this sense, sankhara is equivalent to all five aggregates. So in the first sense here, sankhara is limited to one of the five aggregates, number four. In this, in the second sense, the sankhara is equivalent to a limited portion of the fourth aggregate that is only unwholesome and mundane wholesome volitions. And then in the third sense, sankhara is equivalent to all five aggregates, because all five aggregates are produced by conditions. They're all constructed, fabricated, composed, composite, and so on. And then there's a fourth sense of the word sankhara that we're going to meet later in the sutta, where sankhara has a sense of as equivalent roughly to force, exertion, endeavor, etc. Probably this is related to the sense of sankhara, in that active sense is a volitional activity. Okay, so now we have the case of a person who is contemplating impermanence in all sankharas. So which of these three senses of sankhara is he contemplating impermanence in?
The third one, Bhante?
Say again?
The third one, as in Sabbe Sankara Anicca,
Yeah,
that sense?
yeah, exactly. So he's contemplating the impermanence in all conditioned things, in all the five aggregates. And so to get the sort of comprehensive understanding of impermanence, one has to move through all the five aggregates. Usually in the process of contemplation for most meditators, one will begin with material form, with the body, observing the impermanence in the body. And what's meant here by impermanence, contemplating impermanence in the body, it's not the reflective contemplation, oh, this body is going to get old and die, but it's anupassi, means seeing closely and directly that all of the factors in the body are constantly changing, that they're subject to another expression used to indicate impermanence is, udaya plus vaya, which makes the compound udayabaya. That is, udaya is arising and vaya is vanishing, disappearing. And when that contemplation of arising and vanishing becomes very, very sharp and clear, then it gives way to the contemplation of what's called bhang anupassana, the contemplation of destruction or dissolution. That is, in the earlier stage, one is of contemplating impermanence, one is seeing the arising and vanishing, arising and vanishing. But as that contemplation builds up its power, its momentum, its acuity, its precision, one drops the attention to arising and just focuses on the aspect of vanishing or disappearance, so that one is seeing that all the factors of the body are constantly breaking up and vanishing, breaking up and vanishing. So one begins with contemplation of impermanence in the body, and then one extends it to feeling, to see how the feelings are constantly first arising and passing away, and then as it gains momentum, that the feelings are just breaking up and disappearing. Similar with perceptions or in meditation, ideation, construction of ideas or thoughts arising and vanishing, acts of volition arising and vanishing, consciousness itself arising and vanishing. And so one is contemplating and seeing it again and again. And then this gives way to a perception of impermanence. So now it becomes sharper and clearer, so that one is directly seeing it. And not only seeing it, but it's very, very powerful word here, anicca patisangvedi. So patisangvedi has a sense of experiencing. So it's not only seeing sort of with the mind or intellectually, but one is really experiencing it fully, totally, even you could say with the whole body, experiencing that impermanence. And then the text has, and this really indicates how it has to be done, satatang samitang. We could say continuously and consistently, or consistently and continuously. So for the perception of impermanence to really be capable of bringing the breakthrough of realization, it has to be continuous, constant, consistent. And then abokinang is without any interruption. So it's not interrupted by other thoughts coming in, wandering, the mind wandering back to the past, to the ahead, to the future, pondering, I want this, I like this, I'll get this, and so on, concerned about this, worrying about that. But it's just uninterrupted contemplation, cetasa adimuchamano, that is sort of completely, maybe the mind is completely surrendering without any interruption to that perception of impermanence. And then pariyogahamano, fathoming it with wisdom, with panya. And so this shows the stage of insight contemplation, just building up and preceding the breakthrough to the world transcending path and fruition realizations. Okay, so this is stated with regard to impermanence, and you say that according to the commentarial way of explanation, the mark of impermanence is arising and vanishing, or maybe even better, is the aspect or characteristic of disappearing after having existed, or non-existence, non-existing after having existed. Yeah, please hold with questions. I'll come to them later. Okay, so now this is the contemplation of impermanence. Yeah, and this is the commentarial explanation. I'll give it, I didn't translate it, but I'll give a quick translation here. So for anicca contemplating impermanence, it says that one is anupasati, one is seeing it closely, then pervading it or permeating it with wisdom, thus it's impermanent. And then percipient of impermanence or perceiving impermanence, basically it doesn't really add anything, that one has a perception of things as impermanent. And experiencing impermanence, that one is experiencing with knowledge that things are impermanent. Then satatang, constantly is all the time, samitang, consistently, is so that the subsequent citta or state of mind and the preceding state of mind follow or connected together without any interruption between them. And then one is resolving upon it with the mind, that is, one is establishing it with the mind, and one is fathoming it with wisdom, means one is entering upon it with the knowledge of insight. Okay, so that is the contemplation of impermanence, section on the contemplation of impermanence. Now we come to the second contemplation, which is the contemplation of dukkha in all conditioned phenomena. And again, even though I translate for the sake of convenience dukkha as suffering, here one is not looking, one is not experiencing pain and misery and dejection, unhappiness, but rather one is seeing that all conditioned things, because they undergo arising and passing, that they are unsatisfactory, that one can't find complete, perfect satisfaction and security in all conditioned things. So all the conditioned things are defective, deficient, inadequate, flawed, having defects, and so on, because they're impermanence. And so in a way, because they're impermanent. And so in a way, there's a kind of judgment taking place here that one has a standard that for something to be truly sukha, it has to be not impermanent. And so against that background that posits that complete satisfaction requires permanence. Whatever is impermanent is unsatisfactory. And so here one is contemplating dukkha, the unsatisfactory nature of all conditioned phenomena. And then in the third contemplation, one dwells contemplating non-self in all dhammas, perceiving non-self, experiencing non-self constantly, continuously, uninterruptedly, focusing on it with the mind, fathoming it with wisdom. Why the contemplation of non-self applies to dhammas, to phenomena, not to sankharas, not just the sankharas. I have to say it's something of a puzzle. And I've seen different explanations of this, none completely perfectly satisfactory to me. I remember one explanation is that dhammas here is taken to include unconditioned things as well as conditioned things. And so the unconditioned is nibbana. But one wouldn't be contemplating non-self and nibbana. I've just never heard of anybody doing that. I don't know. I have to confess, I don't really have a good explanation why the text switches from sankharas to dhammas. Is there anything in the Chinese commentaries about this? Yeah. Anyway, just I have to confess some things I don't know the explanation for. Okay, and then the fourth contemplation here, and this is a little strange, that one dwells contemplating the happiness in Nibbana, perceiving such happiness, experiencing such happiness, constantly, continuously, and uninterruptedly focusing on it with the mind, fathoming it with wisdom. And the reason I say that this is a bit strange is that a person who is not yet a noble one, not yet reached the stage from stream entry up, would not have direct access to Nibbana, and so wouldn't be able to contemplate Nibbana constantly, continuously, and uninterruptedly. That would occur only in the case, if we take the Abhidhamma system, in the case of disciples at the four stages of realization who enter the fruition attainment in the Palasamapatti, the fruition attainment, then one would be experiencing the happiness in Nibbana constantly, continuously, and uninterruptedly with the mind. But it seems that the text here is explaining the procedure of insight contemplation leading up to the breakthrough, not the attainment of, not the experience of fruition attainment. Okay, so we're going to maybe sort of restrict ourselves to the three contemplations of impermanence, suffering, and non-self. And then these are elaborated. There's a work, interesting work, coming several centuries after the time of the old Nikayas. It's included in the Khuddaka Nikaya, the miscellaneous collection. And the work is called the Patisambhida Magga. And it gives a detailed explanation of the procedure for attaining the path and fruition. And it distinguishes the two stages. There are two stages involved here. One is, I just, shortly before the class, I copied and pasted in the Pali, so I didn't have time to do a translation, so I'll do the translation on the spot. So the first stage is called Anulomika Kanti, which is the stage of insight knowledge immediately preceding the breakthrough to the world transcending path. And then the next stage is called entering upon samatha niyama. Samatha niyama could be translated as, I think I translated it as the fixed course of rightness. So this is taken to be the world transcending Noble Eightfold Path. And so first one has to obtain anulomika kanti, which means literally it's the acceptance that is in harmony, that is in conformity with the world transcending realization. And then one makes the breakthrough to the world transcending realization, which is samatha niyama, the fixed course of rightness. And so it says that there are 40 ways in which one obtains this anulomika kanti, the acceptance in conformity with the breakthrough, and 40 ways in which one enters upon the fixed course of rightness. Okay, so what are the 40 ways in which one obtains this conformity, this acceptance and conformity? So this is the peak or high point of insight. And so it says, in the 5 aggregates, let's get the verb. So one contemplates the 5 aggregates as impermanent, dukkha, we say suffering, rogato. Some of these are a bit strong, as a disease. Gandato is like a boil. Salato is like a dart. Agato like misery. Abadato like oppression. Parato is as alien. Palokato as disintegrating. Itito as disaster. Upadavato as calamity. Bayato as fearful. Upasagato as a disaster. Chalato as changing. Pabanguto as fragile or breaking up. Aduvato as unstable. Atanato as not protection. Alenato, not a cave. Asaranato, not a refuge. Ritato as hollow. Duchato as void. Sunyato as empty. Anatato as non-self. Adinavato as a danger. Viparinama Dhammato is subject to change. Asarakato as insubstantial. Agamulato as the root of misery. Vadakato as afflictive. Vibhavato as undergoing extermination. Sasavato is connected with the taints. Sankatato is conditioned, Maharamisato as the bait of Mara, Jati Dhammato is subject to birth, Jara Dhammato subject to aging, Vyadi Dhammato subject to illness, Marana Dhammato subject to death, Soka Dhammato subject to sorrow, Parideva Dhammato subject to lamentation, Upayasa Dhammato subject to misery, Sankilesika Dhammato as subject to sankilesa, to defilement. And so when one contemplates the five aggregates in each of these ways, I mean, with very deep insight, then one gains the acceptance in conformity. When one is seeing the five aggregates as impermanent, one gains the acceptance in conformity. But then when one sees the cessation of the five aggregates and sees Nibbana as permanent, then one enters the fixed course of rightness. That is, one gains that world transcending breakthrough, the breakthrough to the world transcending realization. And so this is applied to each of these 40 modes of contemplation. Yeah, so the text develops the same idea with regard to each of these. We don't have to go through all of them. And when you take the 40 modes of contemplation, according to the Patisambhita Magga, it classifies some of the secondary ones under the three headings of impermanence, dukkha, and non-self. And so really, all one has to do is to contemplate deeply the five aggregates by way of the three primary characteristics: impermanent, dukkha, unsatisfactory, and anatta, non-self. And then the text now, our root sutta, tells us and this is why the sutta comes under the sevens. It says that one who contemplates in this way that there are seven kinds of persons who contemplate in this way, who become worthy of gifts, and so on. So who are these seven types of persons? Okay, so the first one, who is contemplating impermanence, reaches the destruction of the asavas, of the taints, in this life itself. And then in this very life, he enters and dwells in the liberation of mind, liberation of, by wisdom, that are taintless through the destruction of the taints of the asavas. So that's the first kind of person who's said to be worthy of gifts. So in other words, this is the person who, by contemplating in this way, reaches arahantship in this life itself. Okay, then the second type of person contemplates in the same way, but this person doesn't reach the destruction of the taints in the course of their life, but rather the destruction of the taints and the ending of life occur simultaneously. So this kind of person is called, there's a technical word for this called samasisi, which means literally a same hitter. And it means that the person reaches the culmination of their process of contemplation, that is the attainment of arahantship, and the ending of the life simultaneously. So it could be that the person, there's like cases of this mentioned in the suttas, somebody is lying on their deathbed and they bring up the contemplation, whether impermanence, dukkha, non-self, and then just before they expire, they reach the destruction of the asavas. So that is the second type of person, one who reaches arahantship just before passing away. And then that person won't take another existence, but enters the final nibbana element. Okay, then the next five types of persons are five types of non-returners. And here we get a little bit technical. And this is where I have some controversial disagreement with the Theravada commentarial tradition. And so I think in my notes, yeah, I have the commentarial interpretation, and then I offer my own, what I think is really the more original explanation. Okay, so the first of these types of non-returners is called, in Pali, it's called Antara Parinibbāyi. Okay, do you see it here? Antara Parinibbāyi. Okay, so this,
Yes, Bhante.
okay, the commentarial explanation is said that this is a person who's reborn somewhere in the pure abodes. And then at the moment of rebirth, or after a short while, or up to the midpoint of the lifespan, this person attains arahantship. So that's the first of these non-returners. The second non-returner is called the Upahacha Parinibbāyi, and this is the commentary that one attains arahantship after passing the midpoint of the lifespan in the pure abodes. Then the third type of anagami is called the asankara parinibbāyi. And notice the base word here, sankara, which has in this context the sense of force, volition, effort. And it explains of these two persons, that is the Antara Parinibbāyi and Upahacha Parinibbāyi, one who destroys the defilements without exertion, without determined effort. And then the next one, the fourth, is called the Sasankara Parinibbāyi, one who destroys the defilements of these two persons, one who destroys the defilements with exertion, with determined effort. So that is the Sasankara Parinibbāyi. And then the fifth of the non-returners and the seventh of the seven persons is called Udang Soto. So Soto is a stream, and Udang is upwards. So this is going upstream. And then a Kanita Gami. A Kanita is the highest of the pure abodes, and Gami means going to. So this is one who is reborn somewhere in the four lower pure abodes, passes away from there, and then in stages one moves upward until one is reborn in this akanita realm, and then attains arahantship and final nibbana there in the akanita realm, the highest of the pure abodes. And so the problem with the commentarial explanation, and this is a rather subtle but technical point, is that it is clear, especially from other suttas, that the five kinds of non-returners are set out in a sequence, going from the sharper to the duller, from the one with stronger faculties to the one with duller faculties. Whereas the commentarial explanation makes the asankara parinibbāyi and the sasankara parinibbāyi divisions of the first and second types. So they are no longer distinct types. So it says one of these two persons, one who destroys the defilements without much exertion, is the asankara parinibbāyi. One who destroys the defilements with strong exertion is the sasankara parinibbāyi. And so with that explanation, you don't get a clear sequence. Does that seem clear? So it's like the antara parinibbāyi can be either asankara or sasankara parinibbāyi. Similarly, upahacha parinibbāyi could be asankara or sasankara parinibbāyi. Okay, so yeah, so I translate. So I give you my own explanation. I think that there's some support for this in the suttas. First, the term, the word antara parinibbāyi. The word antara means in between. And so it suggests to me that this is the person who attains final liberation after passing away from this life, but before taking rebirth into the pure abodes. So there's a kind, and this would suggest that there is something called the antara bhava, which is the intermediate state. Or intermediate existence, a state in between their existence in this life and their rebirth into the pure abodes. And somehow, I don't know how, but the being maybe is existing in a kind of astral body or subtle body, and they're able to arouse insight in that period and then attain final liberation there without taking rebirth even into the pure abodes. So that is the antara parinibbāyi. And then the one called upahacha parinibbāyi. Now the word upahacha is based on the verb upahanati, which means to strike or to hit. And the way I understand it, that it's one who attains final liberation or attains arahantship. How do I render it? One who attains nibbana upon landing, that is, immediately upon, well, very shortly after taking rebirth in the pure abodes. They're able to bring up their insight and then go through the stages and then attain arahantship in the pure abodes very soon after taking rebirth there. And there's a sutta which I think will explain my interpretation. It's in the Anguttara Nikaya, Book of Sevens. I'll come to this when I have to, though we don't have much time for questions. Okay, so then it would make sense to have the next person in the sequence. Okay, please hold your hand or your questions till we finish the sutta. Okay, then we have the next person to be one who attains nibbana without exertion, which would be somebody who, after taking rebirth in the pure abodes, then after passing a certain period in the lifespan, doesn't have to make a great exertion. It's not that they just sit back smoking cigars and watching or drinking beer and watching the Super Bowl on television, and then they attain arahantship. Of course, there's some effort of the mind, but they don't have to make a strong exertion because all of their faculties are sort of ripe enough for the attainment. So as soon as they apply their mind to the arousing of insight, they've reached the breakthrough. So that becomes the third person in the sequence. Then the fourth one has to make strong determination, strong exertion, and reaches liberation. And then the fifth one, the seventh person in the sequence, again, this is the one who goes upstream and then reaches liberation, final liberation in the akanita realm. Okay, so those are the 7 persons worthy of gifts. Okay, now we could look at some questions. Yeah, I know it's a rather technical point, the sutta, but interesting to go through this. Okay, so Samangi, you can pose your question. Samangi, you have to unmute.
Yes, thank you for your teaching. I have some, what I would say, basic questions. First of all, in all of these, you were saying we see anitya as arising and vanishing. So in that same way, can we say when something is vanishing, there will be arising that follows in the other direction? And it doesn't seem to be helpful to see anitya, but is that something that one
What
can...
do you mean arising in the other direction? You mean arising that follows immediately on disappearance?
No, so we see something arising and we contemplate anitya as what arises vanishes. So though unhelpful, can we say when something vanishes, something will arise?
But when one is contemplating the 5 aggregates, say one is contemplating some, let's say the focus is on the feeling. Okay, so you see in the earlier stage of insight, feeling arising and vanishing, arising and vanishing. So that is a kind of perception of impermanence, but the key meaning of impermanence is not lasting, not permanent. And so to sharpen the perception of impermanence, one disregards the arising aspect. Of course, arising is occurring, but the mind is no longer taking account of arising, but is just observing the vanishing or disappearance. And so as one is contemplating, say, the stream of feelings, one is just seeing one feeling after another, breaking, 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 breaking. Does that make sense?
Kind of. I mean, again, it is helpful to see arising, then vanishing. But unhelpful way is the other direction. If somebody can say, well, I lost something, but I will also gain something because I lost something. Just like I gain something, I'm going to lose it. Can you go in the other direction? It's unhelpful, but it's...
Yeah, but it's not, maybe you could go, but that would lead to a kind of world affirmation.
Exactly. So it kind of was, could be...
Sort of like, okay, we're going to die, but we might as well enjoy ourselves now. But things break up and vanish, but they're going to
They will
arise.
come back. Yeah. So it's very unhelpful and not the point,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
could...
Okay, I'm going to have to move on because the 2 other people have questions, at least 2 other people. Okay, so we'll have to move on. So now we go to Vandana.
Thank you so much. So grateful for this teaching. It's very helpful. So because I came from the Goenka's retreat, and for anicca, I actually connect more with changing nature of things, not vanishing, because everything is changing into something else. Like maybe happiness changes to neutral feeling or unhappy feeling. So for me, that works, but I know everybody's different. But my question is, Bhante, for you, is that while we are contemplating anicca, dukkha, anatta, we can pick either of them, right? And can come to the same conclusion.
Yeah, in the earlier stages, this is according to the sort of advice that comes down in the lineage of teachers, one is supposed to contemplate all three. And so usually we begin with impermanence because that is the one which is more evident and is sort of in the sense more objective than the other two.
Maybe for some people, like for me, dukkha is more visible and contemplating on dukkha. So, and one thing which I also wanted to ask you, that is this contemplation has to be during meditation, after meditation, even in any state, right? It has to be continuous contemplation in
Well,
any.
what the sutta is describing when it's speaking about contemplating, perceiving, fathoming, continuously, constantly, without interruption, it's pretty much referring to this would be like a meditative samadhi,
Mhm.
but not the summit, not the jhanic samadhi, but a samadhi governed by insight, an insight samadhi, vipassana samadhi.
Vipassana samadhi. Yeah, I
Of
got it.
course, one
Thank
could do a contemplation of impermanence, at least dukkha,
you. Yeah.
and other in everyday life, but when engaged in other activities, you can't really maintain that constant and continuous perception.
Yeah. Yeah, what's working for me is like when in meditating is happening, then after meditation, it's also happening. So yeah, so maybe, yeah, thank you so much. Anyways, thank you.
Okay, then we take Rina.
Yeah, thank you, Bhante. You had shown those 30 or so uh, adjectives for for all phenomena for the five aggregates. Where can I find that? Is there a reference, or where can I look at it again?
Those 40 modes of contemplation.
Yeah, there were like 40 or so adjectives, like anicca, besides the anicca, anatta, and
Yeah,
dukkha.
they are found, they're taken from that Patisambhida Magga, and there's only a rather inaccessible translation of that by Bhikkhu Nyanamoli, but you could find it more easily. It occurs in the Visuddhi Magga, Path of Purification. Let me see what chapter. It could be chapter 20 or more likely 21.
Okay. And for now, can I just get it pasted somewhere so I can take it, like,
Say
paste
again.
on the chat or something?
I didn't.
Like, I just want to look at it, those 20 of them, and copy it somewhere in case I can't find it later.
The voice is not coming through so
Oh,
clearly.
I just want to look at it and copy it somewhere in case I can't find it later.
Oh, the
Maybe,
Visuddhi, the Path of Purification.
and those 20, 30 words. Maybe put it on the chat or something. Put it on the chat box. Paste it on the chat or somewhere so that I can like copy it.
Oh, you want me to copy into the chat?
Or somewhere, yeah, so that I don't lose
Okay,
it.
I could put it into the chat.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you, Vandan, as well for this.
Okay, while I'm doing this, I'll take the question from V.
Yes, Bhante, regarding the impermanent, the concept of impermanent, I think that I read in the Chinese text or the commentary, normally they would divide it into three categories. The first category, of course, is human, which is 人有生老病死. You know, it's the dukkha, 生老病死, right? And then the second
Okay,
category
Lao
is,
Bing, so okay.
yeah, the
Okay, so
second,
Lao, old age,
yeah,
Bing,
the old age
illness,
and that
sort
dying,
of
yeah,
death.
and death. And that the second category, they mentioned about the all the things, that means the conditioned things,
Yeah.
the category will be 成住坏空. 成, that means that everything come together. 住, it will stay for a while, right? And
Yeah.
that hui is the disintegrating or deteriorating.
Yeah.
And then it becomes sunyata, emptiness.
Yeah.
So it's all conditioned things. And that the third category is that sen, zhu, yi, mie, which refer to the mind. That means the feeling, the perceptions, the consciousness. Sen, that means that everything come together again in stages. Zhu is stay for a while, and that yi, that means that it keep changing.
Yeah.
So nothing is permanent. Mie, that means that it destroyed. It just went in vanishing.
Yeah.
So I think it went into three categories
Yeah.
for the commentary, for the Chinese commentary.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
So that we find that also. I mean, that's the counterpart in the Pali. It's probably based also on a Pali or Sanskrit text. It's the dukkha dukkata, which is literally it's the suffering of suffering or literal suffering, which is it's explained in the suttas as painful feeling, painful bodily and mental feeling. Then there's viparinama dukkata, which is the dukkha or suffering due to change. So that is things that are pleasant change and vanish. And so that gives way to a kind of anguish when the pleasant things change. So that is the viparinama dukkata, suffering due to change. Then the third is sankhara dukkata, and that is the unsatisfactory nature of all sankharas. Yeah, so when the sutta speaks about contemplating dukkha in all sankharas, it's referring to that sankhara dukkata.
okay. Yeah.
Okay, I'm just going to,
Right. Thank you.
let me just put into the chat those 40 modes. Okay, so there. Okay, I'll take one more question, then we'll have to stop.
Okay, I think you put that in a private response, where you just drop that in the chat and the private response. I'm looking for everyone.
Oh,
Yeah.
I see. It didn't go to everyone. Oh, I see. Okay. Yeah.
In chat.
Okay, everyone. Okay. Okay, thanks. Otherwise, only one person and not the one who asked for it will get it. Okay, so we take one more question, and that will be Jia.
Thank you, Bhante. I have a quick question about Pali. You talk about Sankara, and then you talk about Sasankara. And I actually look at the Abhidhamma, it has a Sasankara, which it means prompted. So I'm wondering what's the difference between these two words, Sasankara and Sankara? Is it the same words or?
Yeah, the prefix sa simply means with.
Oh,
And so Sankara, in that case, it's effort. And so the Sasankara is with effort. And the Sasankarika chitta is a chitta in which you have to move yourself to act with some effort. And then asankara is without sankara, in this case, without effort. And
I find the Abhidhamma has Sasankara, which is talking about exertion from the external force.
it could
But
be internal,
Sankara,
it could
yeah.
be internal or external. A person can push themselves to act in a certain way, or they can be persuaded or pressured to act in a way from others. That would be the sasankara chitta. And
Okay.
asankara is unprompted, where just on one's own accord, without exertion by effort, without exertion from effort, without exertion from others, or without internal exertion, one acts in a certain way.
So this could be related to habitual pattern, which is
That could be, yeah, yeah.
okay. Thank you.
Okay, I'm going to have to end the class now. And so we'll end with the sharing of the merits. Okay, so we'll share the merits with the devas, the nagas, and the other beings. Akasata chabumata deva naga mahidika punyanta manumoditva chirangra kantu.
Kaimachi. Ask.
Asanam. Akasata chabumata deva naga mahidika punyanta manumoditva chirangra kantu desanam. Akasata chabumata deva naga mahidika punyanta manumoditva Chirangra kantu mang parang dukha pata chani dukha baya pata chani baya soka pata chani soka antu sabe pipani no. May those in suffering be free from suffering. May those in fear be free from fear. May those in sorrow be free from sorrow. May all living beings also be thus. And then we're going to end with 3 bows to the Buddha, so people here in the hall can stand up. I always forget to ask whether there are people in the library who have questions. Oh, I'm so sorry. I get sort of locked into the computer screen. I'll try to be more mindful next time. Okay, so we'll do the 3 bows. Okay, so thank you everybody for joining.
And a bow to Bhante. Thank you, Bhante.
Thank you,
Sadhu.
Bhante.
Thank you, Bhante.
Thank you, Bhante.
Thank you, Bhante. Thank you.
Good to see you.
Bhante.
Thank you,
Thank you,
Bhante.
Bhante. Take care. Have a good lunch, Bhante.
Sadhu
Thank you.
Have a good
Bhante.
Take
weekend.
care.
Sadhu
Tuluan
Bhante.
Sanai, Namo Buddhaya.
Thank you, Bhante.
Sadhu Bhante.
Bhante.
Thank you.
Be well, Bhante.
Thank you,
Take care.
Bhante.
Bye.
Okay, so I have to end the class now because I have to go up.
Yes, have a good
Okay,
lunch.
so take care,
Bye,
everybody.
Bhante. Tuluan Sanai.
Thank you.